The highly anticipated lending and borrowing protocol developed by MELD has now hit their testnet on the Kanazawa network. And as a part of today's video, in anticipation of their mainnet launch, I want to take a look and see exactly how we can lend and borrow. What's up, MELD Nation? Welcome to Dapp Central, your home for everything blockchain and crypto. My name is Fareed. As a part of today's video, huge announcement here surrounding the MELD ecosystem and their testnet now finally going live. So as a part of this update, I want to take you guys through the MELD app, which will be running on the MELD L1, specifically the Kanazawa testnet, in order to show you, number one, how to create and load up your wallet. Number two, how to lend out your assets to the protocol in order to earn passive yield. Number three, how to borrow against your set collateral. And then number four, how to repay and close out your positions. As always, if you enjoy updates like these, I would appreciate you if you could smash that thumbs up. If it's your first time stopping by and you want more content like this surrounding MELD and everything that they're building, consider subscribing. And last but not least, if you have any questions for me surrounding MELD or any other Cardano project that I cover here on this channel, then as always, make sure to leave a comment down below. Jumping right on into the announcement that was just made earlier, we have the lending and borrowing testnet, which is now live. Now, I have a fully dedicated playlist breaking down everything with MELD, but if you're not aware, they're simply put a lending and borrowing protocol. We saw their testnet launch on Cardano back in January of 2023, and about a year later, in March now, we have the same protocol launching with a few upgrades on their own Kanazawa testnet. So it states here the future of finance is nearly here. The lending and borrowing testnet is now live. I want to just go ahead and just take a minute now to note that this is the testnet. So none of these assets, none of these transactions are real, and make sure to not send any of your real assets on either ETH or the MELD L1 into any of the addresses or contract addresses, I should say, for the testnet. So jumping right back in here, if you want to find out more about the testnet, they've got a fully dedicated guide here on MELD docs. As always, I'll go ahead and leave the links to this down below, but this breaks down how to create a testnet wallet. It also highlights exactly how to top up. It gives you instructions as to how to fill up if you don't have any tokens or if you need something from their faucet, as well as how to connect via MetaMask and potentially how to track your transactions if you want to go ahead and do so utilizing the MELD scan. So I'll leave the link to this down below. So let's just go ahead and just jump right on in. Jumping over to the official testnet, it is available at testnet.meld.com. I already have an existing wallet. If you don't have an existing wallet, you'll be prompted to create one. It's a very, very simple process where you have to basically write down your 24-word seed phrase, re-enter a couple of those to verify. And once you go ahead and do that, it'll actually take you to a brand new wallet with some testnet assets already included for you. So by default, you don't have to go ahead and utilize the faucet. However, if you want more tokens, you can go ahead and do so. So I'm going to quickly sign in here. And just like that, I have access to my wallet. Now, I want to go ahead and just highlight a couple of things here. The first is that this contains multiple networks. So this particular wallet is connected to the pre-prod testnet on Cardano. It's also connected to the Kanazawa testnet, which is the MELD L1, as well as the Mumbai testnet for any tokens coming from Polygon, as well as the Fuji testnet for tokens coming from Avalanche. So as a brief reminder, MELD is an ecosystem or a protocol that will allow for other networks to be able to connect and interact with it. Now, that said, we are expecting the, I believe, support for Cardano assets in the near future. The team is still working with IOG on an issue that was identified back in 2021. However, right now, as it stands, the testnet is for ERC20 or Ethereum-based assets. So with that said, here in my wallet on the left-hand side, I'm reviewing all of my assets. As you can see, I've got 20 assets made up of $94,000. I can go ahead and quickly review them here. This also supports NFTs. So as you guys can see here, I do have a couple of MELD Bank Manager NFTs that I can review here as well. So pretty versatile wallet. Jumping back over here, I can view at a glance exactly how my portfolio is doing. And then on the right-hand side here, I've got my activity or my recent transactions. I can also bridge my assets from Cardano over to the MELD L1 if you want to potentially stake. And then you can also see your upper and lower limits when it comes to your supply power, your borrow power, how much you have staked, and your average yield. Jumping into the middle section here, the MELD team recently released staking not too long ago with data here on the left-hand side showing you what can be staked and what is already staked. And on the right-hand side, you have the pool information, whether you're staking on Cardano or whether you're staking on the MELD L1. Right in the middle here, you've got your staking summary, and then you've got your top yielding tokens and the highest TVL pools, whether that's on Cardano or whether that's on the MELD network. So now that we've got the beginning out of the way, jumping into the good stuff, which is the lending and borrowing. I'm going to get myself out of the way here just so you guys can quickly see. On the left-hand side, we've got the ability to supply. So this is going to highlight all of the tokens that I can supply. Of course, again, these are all of the tokens on the MELD L1 or anything that is on the Ethereum side of the equation. I've got my collateral. Right now, it stands at $0. We're going to go ahead and actually play with that just a little bit in just a moment. Right in the middle, I've got my summary, which lets me know exactly how much I've either borrowed or supplied. And I've got my aggregate yield because, again, keep in mind that you can lend and you can borrow against what you've put up as collateral. So depending on if you're just lending, that aggregate yield will be positive if you're lending more than you're borrowing. However, if you're lending and then borrowing more than you've lent, or in terms of the interest rate of the tokens that you've borrowed, that aggregate yield could potentially become a negative. Now, right below that, I've got all of the assets which can be lent or borrowed, their supply rate, the borrow variable rate, the borrow, I believe this is going to be the fixed rate, and then the borrow power. Again, I want to take a minute to note here that this is a testnet. A lot of this stuff is still in the works. We are expecting for the team to be making continuous updates, just like they did when they launched on the Cardano network. So keep that in mind here. If you guys find any bugs, they do have a process to go ahead and report that over to the team in preparation for the mainnet launch. Now, while I'm on that topic, the mainnet launch, I believe the team is working very hard to get this off to the mainnet. However, they haven't given us a date just yet. I believe they're really waiting to squash a lot of the bugs or potential issues and just finalize some calculations here, right? Because again, this is a pretty in-depth protocol before they make any announcements surrounding their mainnet. However, the fact that they're now on the testnet, I think gives the community an idea as to what we can expect for the future or for the full developed product. Jumping right back in here, on the right-hand side, we've got the borrow side of the equation. So again, on the left-hand side, very simple, what you can supply and what you have already supplied, which you'll see when I actually supply something. And then on the right-hand side, this lists everything that I can borrow with a really, really nice feature here, which is the risk factor. So because you can borrow and lend multiple assets, if you're only lending, there's little to no risk in terms of you being liquidated because you're only supplying assets to the protocol. However, if you are lending and then using that as collateral to borrow against, that will raise your health factor, or your risk factor, I should say, in the sense that if your collateral becomes or the value of your collateral drops too low in comparison to what you've borrowed, that you could be in a potential situation to be liquidated. So in a glance, the health factor or the risk factor here will give you a number between 0 and 100. And the closer you are to that scale of 100, the closer you are to actually being liquidated and the more risky your position is. So the closer you get to that 100, the more likely it is that you probably need to either add more collateral or reduce the size of your borrowed position. That said, let's go ahead and just jump right on in now that we've got an understanding of the available features in the user interface layout. So let's go ahead and quickly supply MELD, which right now would give us a yield of 88%. Again, this is just on the testnet. That is a huge APR here. Really exciting to see, but I would really be interested to see exactly how much APRs come when the mainnet launches. Now, keep in mind that because everything is variable, depending on how much MELD is being lent out at one point, that variable rate could change, right? So if there isn't enough MELD being lent out and there's high demand for MELD, you can definitely bet that you're going to be earning a lot more yield by supplying MELD. And then inversely, if there is low demand for MELD, right, and you're lending that out and nobody's really borrowing it, the APR or the yield may not necessarily be as much. Now, let's go ahead and lend some MELD here. We have $536 worth of MELD. As soon as I actually click on the MELD asset here, I can see the supply yield, the borrow interest rate, which is of course much higher than the interest yield, the market price, the borrow power, which right now sits at 0 because I haven't lent anything to the protocol. I then have a vault saturation as well as a vault utilization. So the saturation, I believe, shows me exactly how much MELD is currently available. And then the utilization shows me from that amount, how much has actually been borrowed. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and quickly supply some MELD by clicking the supply button here. And let's say my maximum is 30,000 MELD that I can loan out. I'm going to lend out 15,000. And again, I've had my supply APY, my risk factor, which will jump from 0 to 0 because again, I'm supplying to the protocol. My risk factor will only increase when I begin to borrow against my collateral. Now, a really interesting feature here that I spoke with the team about is the use as collateral feature. So there may be a case where you want to supply an asset without necessarily having it be used as collateral, because again, any collateral that you put up to the protocol can essentially be borrowed against. And if you have a liquidation event, that collateral will be taken from you. So there may be an event where you just want to supply a particular token, but you don't want that being counted towards your actual collateral. I'm going to show you guys an example of that here in just a moment. So I'm going to jump back in here and I'm going to get myself out of the way. For now, I'm going to keep this as yes, which will then allow for me to have a specific amount of borrowing power based on the LTV for the MELD token. Next, I can see the time that it's going to take for the transaction to execute in, and I can also see the gas fee, which is paid in GMELD. I'm going to quickly go ahead and confirm. That took just a couple of seconds, and I'm going to go ahead and approve the transaction and confirm that I do want to supply that 15,000 MELD. So just like that, the 15,000 MELD has been approved or supplied to the protocol. If I jump back out of here, this should update here to show me that I have supplied that MELD. So just like that, we can now see that I have $268 worth of MELD, which has now been supplied to the protocol, which is now earning me 0.19 yield. Now, again, the values that we just saw there stayed at 88%. Obviously, that's not the case here, which again is why I'm reiterating that this is just a test net. So it seems like the team still has a little bit of ironing out when it comes to some of the values here that are showed when it comes to the APYs, but the transaction has gone through successfully. So as you guys can see here now, I can see a new section which has popped up. So I have all the assets that are available to be supplied down here. And then I have the actual assets that I have already supplied, which are listed up here. So now let's see here, borrowing power has updated, and it's now letting me know that I can borrow up to $158 or 9,000 MELD in return. Now, if I jump over to the right-hand side here, let's go ahead and actually borrow some TADA. Let's see if we can go ahead and do that. And I'm going to click on borrow. I now have the total amount of TADA that I can go ahead and borrow, which would be 206. For now, let's just say I just want to borrow 100. And as you see right there, my risk factor will immediately shoot up from 41.58% from 0, which is what it's currently at right now because I'm not actually borrowing anything. The interest type is variable. Again, keep in mind that as people come in and supply or withdraw in terms of loaning out or taking out collateral, taking out some of the supply that is available, the variable rates for the interest will fluctuate. Next, I'm going to quickly confirm, and I'm going to borrow that 100 test ADA. Just like that, the transaction should be complete. And what I love about this is how quickly the protocol responds. So we should get an update here. And just like that, as you saw, in real time, the platform actually updated. So right now, if I jump back over into, let me just click on this here. This is the overall summary of what I'm currently borrowing and what my net worth is. If you guys recall, I had lent out, I believe it was $264. I then went ahead and borrowed against that. So I borrowed $76, which was the test ADA. I can see that the yield that I'm generating from the MELD is 0.19%, whereas the interest that I'm generating is 10%. Now that gives me an aggregate yield of about minus 2.87%. Again, I do think that the team has a little bit of calculation updates to make here. But either way, the aggregate yield field displays the aggregation between all of the yield that I'm currently earning and all of the interest that is currently accruing. So again, we have the interest rate up here. That's just for the Cardano or the test ADA position. And I can see my risk factor, which is continuing to update. Now, let me go ahead and actually kind of turn things up a notch. I'm going to go ahead and actually borrow some AVAX as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click on borrow. And the max that I can currently borrow is going to be 1.69. So let me just go ahead and just borrow one. And as you can see, my risk factor is going to continue to increase because I'm now borrowing more of my collateral. So that will take me from 41.47 to 67. I'm going to quickly confirm, borrow. And just like that, the test AVAX should now be borrowed. And if I close this out, boom. I mean, I really love how quick this is. That is now updated to show me that I've now borrowed $126 and I've supplied $265. So if I jump back over into the summary here, another really cool thing is this view right here at the very bottom. So it shows me how much collateral I have, right, which is the little green amount, versus exactly how much potential I could actually loan out to the protocol, right? So out of the total value of my entire wallet, which is, let's see here, $94,000, I'm only supplying a very small sliver to the MELD protocol. So the gray bar here shows the total amount that I could potentially loan out versus the green showing just the little bit of amount that I've actually lent out. Right below that, I have my liquidation point. Now, ideally, if I were to supply a little bit more, this would be drawn out. But what this would show you is exactly how close you are to being liquidated given the amount of collateral that you've put down and how much you've borrowed against that. So let me go ahead and just supply a little bit more here just to kind of put things into perspective. And I've got quite a bit, let's see here, of test wrapped BTC. Now, I don't want to go ahead and actually provide this as collateral that I want to borrow against. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys that other feature here that I mentioned earlier. So I can click on this here. And let's say I want to provide 0.2, there we go. And I can see here that my risk value or my risk factor is going to dramatically decrease because the amount of collateral that I'm putting up in comparison to the amount of collateral that I currently have, it's going to be a lot more, right? So because I'm now putting up almost $20,000 worth of collateral compared to the $264, that's reducing my risk from about 67 or from a score of 67 all the way down to a score of about 1. Now, because I don't want to risk losing my BTC, I'm going to go ahead and actually mark this off here, which means that it won't be counted as collateral. And as soon as I do that, you can see that the risk score goes back up. So again, this is a really interesting feature. If you want to go ahead and just earn a yield on a particular platform or on MELD, I should say, and you want to be less risk adverse, you would want to go ahead and check off that do not use as collateral checkbox. If you want to go ahead and borrow against your assets, then you want to go ahead and make sure that you do utilize whatever you're putting up as collateral. So just for the sake of the demo here, I'm actually going to turn this back on. I'm going to approve. And let me get myself out of the way. We're going to confirm and supply. So my risk score should drop dramatically. And we'll give that just a second to process. And boom, there we go. It is now dropped. And I can now see all of the collateral that I've supplied. So I apologize. I think I mentioned $20,000 worth of BTC earlier. It's actually $14,000 worth of BTC. So 265 MELD. 14,000 worth of BTC. Unfortunately, that BTC isn't earning me any yield. Again, keep in mind, this is just the testnet. Now, one thing to quickly highlight as well that will be coming down the pipes is the risk model. So as you guys can see here, when it comes to BTC, the max LTV or loan to value ratio that I can actually pull out with respect to how much collateral I've put down is a max of 70%. The liquidation threshold will be an LTV of 75%. with a penalty of 7% of my entire collateral position going back to whoever is liquidating me, with I think a minor portion going to the MELD protocol or the MELD platform. Right below that, they do have some vault performance metrics here, and I do not have the specifics for everything that this actually represents. But just from what I can see here, it appears that the borrow TVL is basically drawn out in this light cyan colored line, with the supply APY colored in this darker bluer line. So over the course of time, as people come in, lend and borrow, because again, everything is variable on the platform, you would expect this particular performance to continue to fluctuate. So this would allow for you to quickly see when it's a good time to potentially come in and lend your assets to the protocol to earn the most. And it'll also let you see when it's the best time to potentially borrow at the cheapest interest rates. So the team, again, has really thought very deeply into making this a platform that is extremely simple to use and very friendly in terms of visuals. Now, if I jump into MELD here, you'll also notice that let's see here. Again, I have the collateral listed at the very top here. And this is, I think, does a better job of showing the total amount now, right? So you can see that that collateral bar is pretty big in comparison to what I can actually provide to the platform, and that I've only borrowed a little bit compared to what I would need to borrow in order to get liquidated. All right, the next thing I want to quickly highlight is the fact that the risk model is different for every token. So I've now selected MELD, and as you can see here, the TVL for the amount of collateral that I put down, if I want to borrow MELD specifically, is currently set to 60% with a liquidation threshold of 70%. So a little bit more margin there for downside with a penalty of about 10%. So it's really good to see that the team has taken the time to provide a different risk model, and they're going to be providing more information surrounding exactly how the risk model works and how they've come to those numbers. Now, jumping back out to the top here in terms of the summary, I can see again the total supply breakdown. So I've supplied $14,700. And of that, just a small fraction there is made up of MELD in the red, with the majority made of Bitcoin in the orange. And my borrow power now stands at about $10,000, given the fact that I put up $14,000 for collateral. The very last thing I want to do is go ahead and just quickly break down the repayment process. So let's go ahead and just do that together. If I get myself out of the way here, I'm going to click on my test ADA. I will go ahead and either borrow more or repay. For now, I'm going to repay. And I'm going to go ahead and just max this out, approve, and confirm. And as you can see there, I've successfully repaid my 100 test ADA. Let's go ahead and take a look at our risk model. It has now updated. My interest is also lowered, and my total borrowed has now went down. If I go ahead and click on this test AVAX, I'm gonna go ahead and repay that as well. So we'll knock that out. We'll pay back the majority of it, excuse me. We'll approve that. And we will go ahead and confirm. Now, keep in mind that because I have borrowed these assets, interest is accruing in real time. So if I close this out here, I will still have, let's see here, we're going to give this a second to update. But as soon as that updates, I may have a couple of pennies left in terms of what I actually have to pay back to the protocol. So here I've got just a little bit of interest that did appear to be accrued, about a penny's worth of test ADA. Again, because I don't have that test ADA right now in my wallet as a token, I can't repay that back. However, if I were holding test ADA here on this side of the equation, I would be able to pay back that little bit of interest that I do owe to the protocol. So do keep that in mind there when it comes to repayment. I believe that will do it here for today's update, breaking down the MELD testnet. Quite a bit of information to cover there, but this is just the very beginning. And as another reminder, guys, this is just the early version of the testnet. So jump in there, check it out. Go ahead and set up your wallet. You can check out the faucet. You can then begin to lend or supply and then borrow against that. Keep in mind that this is just one piece of the MELD offering, which is the crypto to crypto portion of the protocol. They are still working on their neobank, with hopefully an announcement coming soon surrounding the crypto to fiat portion. If you do have any bugs, as I mentioned earlier, make sure to go ahead and report those. But that'll do it here for today's video, breaking down how to supply, how to borrow, and how to repay utilizing the MELD protocol. That said, and as always, if you enjoyed content just like this, highlighting everything going on here on the MELD L1, please make sure to smash that thumbs up. If it's your first time stopping by and you want more content like this breaking down MELD, consider subscribing to the channel. And last but not least, if you have any questions for me surrounding anything I've chatted about, then as always, make sure to leave a comment down below. That said, I'll see you guys in the next video.